The first time I saw my ex-husband cry, he was standing on my front porch in the middle of a thunderstorm. 3 years earlier, he had walked out of our marriage without shedding a single tear. Now he looked broken. Rain soaked through his jacket. His shoulders trembled. His eyes were red. And the first words out of his mouth were, "Please, just listen." For a moment, I almost closed the door. Almost. But to understand why he was standing there, you need to understand how he left. I married Ryan when I was 26. We built a simple life together in a quiet town outside Nashville. Nothing glamorous, just real. We bought a small house, raised a golden retriever named Daisy, worked hard, paid bills, made plans. For 17 years, I believed we were happy. Then one Tuesday afternoon, everything changed. I came home early from work because a meeting had been canceled. Ryan wasn't expecting me. When I walked into the kitchen, he was sitting at the table with a woman I'd never seen before. Young, beautiful, maybe 25. Long blonde hair, perfect smile. The moment they saw me, silence filled the room. My stomach dropped instantly. Ryan stood up. His face looked guilty, not ashamed, just caught. "We need to talk," he said. Those 4 words destroyed my life. The woman left. Then Ryan told me everything. Her name was Madison. They had been seeing each other for 8 months. 8 months. While I cooked dinners, paid bills, planned vacations, trusted him. I remember staring at him in disbelief. "Why?" I whispered. His answer still hurts. "Things changed, that's all. Things changed." 17 years reduced to 3 words. A month later, he moved out. 6 months later, they were living together. People in town talked. Some took my side. Others acted like I should have expected it. One woman actually told me, "Men go through phases," as if betrayal was some natural weather pattern. The divorce became final the following spring. Ryan looked relieved during the court hearing. I looked numb. The hardest part wasn't losing my husband. It was realizing I had spent years loving someone who could replace me so easily. For a long time, I blamed myself. Maybe I worked too much. Maybe I wasn't exciting anymore. Maybe I got older. Then one evening, my mother said something that changed me. "People don't leave because you weren't enough," she said. "They leave because they're chasing something they think will make them happier." That sentence stayed with me. Slowly, I rebuilt. I started hiking, joined a book club, took classes I'd always postponed. For the first time in years, I focused on myself instead of everyone else. Life became peaceful again. Not perfect, but peaceful. Then 3 years passed. 3 years without hearing from Ryan. 3 years of silence. Until the stormy night, he appeared at my door. "Please let me explain," he begged. I folded my arms. "Explain what?" His voice cracked. "Everything." Against my better judgment, I let him inside. He sat at my kitchen table. It's the same table where he used to drink coffee every morning. Only now he looked older, much older. Life had not been kind to him. For several moments, neither of us spoke. Then he finally said it. Madison left. I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no revenge, nothing. He stared down at his hands. "She left 8 months ago." Still silence. Then he laughed bitterly. "I guess I finally know how you felt." That caught my attention. Ryan explained everything. After our divorce, things with Madison had seemed perfect, exciting, carefree. But eventually reality arrived. Bills, responsibilities, commitment. The same things he had once complained about in our marriage. Only this time there was no history holding things together. No foundation, no loyalty, just attraction. And attraction fades. 2 years into their relationship, Madison started seeing someone else, someone younger than Ryan. The irony wasn't lost on him. One day, she packed her things and left, just like he had once left me. I listened quietly. Then I asked the obvious question, "Why are you here?" Ryan looked up. Tears filled his eyes, real tears, not performative ones. "I need you to know I'm sorry." I stared at him. "After everything, that was it? Sorry? 17 years. One affair. One divorce. 3 years of silence, and now sorry?" He wiped his face. I was selfish. I said nothing. I thought happiness was somewhere else. Still silence. I thought I deserved more. The room felt heavy. Finally, I spoke. And now? Ryan swallowed hard. Now I know what I threw away. There it was. The truth, not love. Regret, a painful difference. Outside, thunder echoed across the sky. Ryan looked around my home, the framed photos, the bookshelves, the life I rebuilt without him. You seem happy, he said softly. I was. That realization surprised me. For years, I imagined this moment, imagined feeling victorious. Instead, I simply felt free. Ryan leaned forward. I know I don't deserve another chance. I appreciated the honesty. You're right. His face crumpled slightly, then he nodded, slowly, accepting it. For the first time all evening, he looked truly defeated. Not because he lost me, because he finally understood what he had done. There is a difference. People think betrayal hurts because someone leaves. It doesn't. Betrayal hurts because someone looks at your loyalty and decides it isn't valuable anymore. Ryan had learned that lesson the hard way. A long silence filled the room. Then he reached into his pocket and handed me something. A photograph. It was from our 20th wedding anniversary trip, the year before everything collapsed. We were standing on a beach, laughing, happy. Or at least I thought we were. I carried this for months, he said quietly. I kept remembering who I used to be. I studied the picture. Then I set it down. The woman in that photo wasn't me anymore. She was someone who still believed love alone could protect a marriage. Life had taught her otherwise. Eventually, Ryan's stood. The storm outside had weakened. Rain tapped softly against the windows. At the door, he paused. I really am sorry, Claire. For the first time, I believed him. Not because of his words, because regret had finally humbled him. But some lessons arrived too late. I opened the door. Cool air drifted inside. Ryan stepped onto the porch. Then he turned one last time. I hope you're happy. I smiled gently, not because he said it, because I finally was. Thank you, I replied, and I meant it. He nodded before walking into the darkness. I never saw him again. A year later, I heard he'd moved to another state, started over somewhere new. I genuinely wished him well. Not because he deserved forgiveness, because I deserved peace. That's something people misunderstand about healing. Healing isn't watching someone suffer. It isn't revenge. It isn't getting even. It's reaching a point where their choices no longer control your happiness. Ryan spent years chasing something better, only to discover that loyalty, trust, and genuine love aren't things you replace, they're things you protect. And by the time he understood that, the life he wanted back no longer existed. As for me, I kept moving forward, one step at a time. One peaceful day after another, and sometimes, when storms roll across Tennessee and rain taps softly against my windows, I remember the man who once walked away. Then I remember the woman who survived it. And honestly, she's the person I'm proudest of becoming. The last thing my husband said before leaving me was a laugh. Not a nervous laugh, not an awkward one, a real laugh. The kind that comes from someone who believes they're winning. I still remember standing in our kitchen in Lexington, Kentucky, gripping the edge of the counter while 20 years of marriage collapsed around me. Across from me stood my husband, Mark. Beside him stood Brianna, 28 years old, beautiful, confident, young enough to be our daughter. I was 48. We had built a life together, a house, a business, a family. And somehow none of that mattered anymore. Mark folded his arms and shook his head. You take everything too personally. I stared at him. You've been having an affair. He actually smiled. Then he laughed. A short, cruel sound. Claire, people move on. People move on. As if 20 years was a seasonal hobby. As if loyalty was something you simply outgrew. That afternoon, he packed 2 suitcases and left. Brianna followed him out the front door. I stood at the window and watched them drive away. Not once did either of them look back. The months afterward were brutal. Divorce has a way of stripping your identity down to the bones. Friends chose sides. Neighbors whispered. Even some relatives suggested I should have seen it coming. Apparently, women are expected to predict betrayal before it happens. I spent many nights sitting alone in my living room, wondering what was wrong with me. Maybe I wasn't exciting enough. Maybe I had gotten older. Maybe I had become invisible. Then one evening, my daughter Emily sat beside me on the couch. She was 23, wise beyond her years. She took my hand and said something I never forgot. "Mom, someone else's selfishness is not proof that you're unlovable." I cried harder than I had since the divorce. Because deep down, I needed someone to remind me. The next 3 years changed everything. I sold the house, started a small interior design business, lost weight, made new friends, traveled. Slowly, painfully, I rebuilt my life. The woman who emerged from that wreckage wasn't the same person Mark had left behind. She was stronger, calmer, wiser, and most importantly, she no longer needed his approval. I heard occasional updates through mutual friends. At first, Mark seemed happier than ever. Luxury vacations, new cars, social media photos filled with forced perfection. Brianna posted constantly. Sunsets, restaurants, beach resorts, the usual performance. Then the pictures became less frequent. Then they stopped entirely. I didn't think much about it. People create their own consequences eventually. Life handles most things without our help. 3 years after the divorce, I was making dinner on a rainy Thursday evening when somebody knocked on my front door. At first, I ignored it. The weather was terrible. Thunder rolled across the sky. The knocking came again, more urgent this time. I opened the door and froze. Mark stood on my porch. For a second, I barely recognized him. His hair had gone noticeably gray. Dark circles hung beneath his eyes. His shoulders looked smaller, defeated. Like life had squeezed all the confidence out of him. Rain soaked through his jacket. He stared at me. Then his eyes filled with tears. Real tears. Not dramatic ones. Broken ones. "Please," he whispered, "can we talk?" For several seconds, neither of us moved. The irony felt almost unreal. 3 years earlier, I had begged him to explain why he was destroying our marriage. Now he stood here begging me. I should have closed the door. Part of me wanted to, but curiosity won. Stepped aside. Mark entered slowly. The house felt different now. Brighter, warmer, mine. He sat at the kitchen table while rain hammered the windows. For a while, he simply stared at his hands. Finally, he spoke. Brianna left. I said nothing. He laughed bitterly. The sound carried none of the arrogance from years ago. Funny, isn't it? Still silence. He rubbed his face. "She left me for someone younger." The words hung in the room. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Life has a strange sense of humor sometimes. Mark looked up. His eyes were red. "I finally understand what I did to you." I folded my arms. "Do you?" He nodded, slowly, painfully. Then he told me everything. After the excitement faded, problems appeared. Arguments, financial issues, trust issues. Eventually, Brianna started spending time with a younger man she met through work. Mark ignored the warning signs, just as I once had. Then one morning, she packed her things and left. No explanation, no discussion, no goodbye, just gone. The exact same way he had abandoned me emotionally before walking away physically. As he spoke, I noticed something. He wasn't crying because Brianna left. He was crying because reality finally arrived. Consequences had caught up, and they hurt. A lot. "I was horrible to you," he said quietly. I didn't argue. He had been. For years I imagined this moment. I imagined feeling victorious, satisfied, maybe even happy. Instead, I felt tired. Tired for the woman I used to be. The woman who blamed herself for someone else's betrayal. Mark looked around the kitchen. The family photos, the artwork, the peaceful life I'd built. "You seem happy," he said softly. I thought about it. I was, not every day, not perfectly, but genuinely. And that happiness had nothing to do with him anymore. That realization felt powerful. Mark swallowed hard. I miss my family, there it was, the truth. Not just Brianna, not just loneliness, everything. The dinners, the holidays, the stability. The people who loved him before he decided excitement mattered more. Regret often arrives carrying a suitcase full of memories. I sat across from him quietly. Then I asked one question. "Why are you really here?" His face crumpled. For a moment he looked older than 60. "I wanted to tell you I'm sorry." The room went silent. Outside, thunder rolled again. I studied the man who once laughed while destroying my heart. The man who made me question my worth. The man who chose temporary excitement over lasting love. And for the first time, I felt nothing resembling anger, only distance, emotional distance, the kind that forms after years of healing. "I forgive you," I said softly. Tears slid down his cheeks, but then I continued. "That doesn't mean I want you back." His eyes closed, as if he already knew, as if he expected it. Because deep down he did. Some doors close permanently, not out of revenge, out of growth. Mark nodded slowly, then he stood. Neither of us spoke for a moment. Finally, he walked toward the door. Before leaving, he turned around. "I really was a fool." I smiled sadly. "Yes," I replied. For the first time in years, he didn't argue. He simply accepted it. Then he stepped into the rain. I watched him disappear into the darkness. Not with satisfaction, not bitterness, just peace. Because healing isn't watching someone suffer. Healing is reaching a point where their suffering no longer controls your emotions. 3 years earlier, Mark had laughed while walking away from my life. Now he walked away quietly, and the difference wasn't him. The difference was me. I no longer needed him to understand my value. I already knew it. And that was something no one could ever take away again. The moment my husband told me I was too old for him, something inside me broke. Not loudly, not dramatically, quietly. Like a glass placed under pressure for years finally cracking. We were sitting on our back porch in a small town outside Nashville, Tennessee. The sun was setting. Birds were singing. 24 years of marriage sat between us. And somehow, none of it seemed to matter anymore. Greg stared into his coffee cup and said the words I will never forget. "I think we've outgrown each other, Diane." I knew immediately that wasn't the truth. People don't leave 24-year marriages because they outgrow each other. They leave because they want something else. Someone else. I looked at him carefully. "Who is she?" His silence lasted 3 seconds. 3 seconds too long. Her name was Chloe. She was 30 years old. I was 52. Greg was 55. When he finally admitted the truth, he avoided eye contact. "She's younger. Things are just different." That word followed me for months. Different meant prettier. Different meant exciting. Different meant not me. Then came the sentence that haunted me. "Diane, I still care about you, but we're in different stages of life now." Different stages. I laughed bitterly. We were 3 years apart in age, but somehow I was suddenly too old, too predictable, too familiar. 24 years of loyalty reduced to a number, a birthday, a wrinkle, a gray hair. 3 months later, Greg moved out. 6 months later, he married Chloe. The entire town talked about it. Small towns always do. Some people felt sorry for me. Others pretended not to notice. The hardest part wasn't losing my husband. It was realizing how easily he had replaced me. The woman who stood beside him while he built his business. The woman who worked double shifts when money was tight. The woman who raised his children. Apparently, all of that could be traded for youth. The first year after the divorce nearly destroyed me. I stopped attending social events, stopped answering calls, stopped looking in mirrors. Every reflection seemed to accuse me. "You're older now. You're not enough. You're replaceable." Then one afternoon, something changed. I was volunteering at the local animal shelter when an elderly woman named Martha sat beside me. She was 78 years old, sharp-minded, blunt, the kind of woman who had stopped caring about polite lies decades earlier. She listened quietly while I explained what happened. When I finished, she asked one question. "Did he leave because you're old, or because he's scared of getting old himself?" I blinked. The question stunned me. I had never considered it before. Martha smiled softly. "Some people chase younger faces because they think it slows time down." That sentence stayed with me. For months, maybe years. Instead of mourning my marriage forever, I slowly rebuilt my life. I joined hiking groups, took photography classes, started traveling with friends. For the first time in decades, I learned who Diane was without being someone's wife. and surprisingly, I liked her. Life became peaceful. Not perfect, but peaceful. Meanwhile, Greg's life looked glamorous online. Beach vacations, luxury restaurants, perfect selfies, perfect smiles, perfect life. At least that's what social media wanted everyone to believe. Then reality arrived. The way it always does. 3 years passed. I turned 55. One rainy November evening, someone knocked on my front door. I wasn't expecting visitors. When I opened it, my breath caught Greg. For a moment, I barely recognized him. His hair had thinned significantly. His shoulders sagged. Dark circles sat beneath tired eyes. The confident man who once walked away from me looked completely different. Older. Much older. Life had finally caught him. Neither of us spoke at first. Then he said quietly, "Can we talk?" I almost said no, so almost. Instead, I stepped aside. Greg entered slowly, looking around the house, the same house he once couldn't wait to leave. I offered coffee. He nodded. His hands trembled slightly while holding the mug. That frightened me. Greg had always been steady, confident, controlled. Now he looked exhausted. Finally, he spoke. "Chloe left." I said nothing. 6 months ago. Still silence. Greg stared at the floor, then laughed bitterly. She met someone younger. The irony landed heavily between us. Neither of us acknowledged it. Neither of us needed to. He continued talking. The marriage had started falling apart almost immediately. At first, everything felt exciting. Adventure, attention, validation. Then reality replaced fantasy. Bills, responsibilities, aging, stress. The same things every relationship eventually faces. Only this time, Greg discovered something painful. Youth doesn't protect people from ordinary life. Problems still arrive. Wrinkles still appear. Time still moves forward. Nobody escapes it. "I kept trying to stay young," he admitted quietly. "I spent years terrified of aging." I listened carefully. For the first time, I saw honesty. Not excuses, not blame. Truth, raw truth. Greg looked at me. His eyes filled with regret. "I thought leaving you would make me feel younger." The room stayed silent. It didn't. I looked out the window. Rain tapped softly against the glass. 3 years earlier, I would have given anything to hear those words. Now they felt strangely distant. Like hearing news about someone else's life. Greg swallowed hard. "I hurt you." "Yes, I embarrassed you. Yes. I threw away the best thing I ever had. Maybe, maybe not. Because life had changed me too." The woman sitting across from him wasn't the same woman he left. Pain had transformed her. Heartbreak had strengthened her. Loneliness had taught her self-respect. Finally, Greg asked the question I think he had carried all evening. "Do you think you could ever forgive me?" I smiled sadly. "Greg, I forgave you a long time ago." His face softened immediately. Hope appeared. Then I finished speaking. "But forgiveness isn't the same as wanting someone back." The hope disappeared. Not because I was cruel. Because I was honest, I no longer needed him. That realization surprised both of us. For years, I thought losing my husband was the worst thing that could happen. Now I understood something different. Sometimes losing the wrong person creates space to find yourself. We talked for another hour. About our children, about mistakes, about growing older. Before leaving, Greg stood near the doorway and looked back at me. For the first time in years, he seemed genuinely humble. Then he asked quietly, "What was the lesson?" I frowned slightly. "The lesson?" He nodded. "The lesson life was trying to teach me." I thought about it carefully, then answered. "You spent years believing youth had value and age had limitations." Greg listened. I continued softly. "But age gave me wisdom, patience, strength, loyalty." His eyes lowered. "And youth couldn't save you from yourself." The truth hit him immediately. I could see it. Years of regret. Years of chasing something that was never the real problem. Greg nodded slowly. Then he whispered, "I understand now." After he left, I stood by the window watching his car disappear into the rain, and for the first time, I felt no anger, no bitterness, no desire for revenge. Only peace. Because life had already taught him the painful lesson he needed to learn. Beauty fades, excitement fades, youth fades, but character remains. And sometimes the greatest victory isn't watching someone regret losing you. It's realizing you no longer need their regret to feel whole. The day my husband told me I was getting old, I was standing in our kitchen making coffee. 22 years of marriage. 2 children already grown. A lifetime of memories packed into one house. And somehow, none of it mattered anymore. Jason stood near the counter adjusting his expensive watch while avoiding my eyes. "I'm not happy anymore, Rachel." I laughed nervously. People don't throw away 22 years because they're unhappy. Then he finally looked at me, and I saw it. The guilt, the distance, the decision already made. "There's someone else," I whispered. His silence answered everything. My stomach dropped. "How long?" "A few months. A few months." The words echoed inside my head while the coffee machine continued dripping behind me. Then came the sentence that haunted me for years. Jason rubbed his forehead and said quietly, "We've changed. You're not the same woman you used to be." I stared at him. What does that even mean? His eyes shifted away. "Look at us, Rachel. We're older now. Older, not we, me." I understood exactly what he was saying. The wrinkles around my eyes. The gray hairs I stopped hiding. The body that had carried children. The woman who spent years putting everyone else first. Meanwhile, the woman he left me for was 29. I was 48. 3 months later, he moved out. 6 months later, he married her. Her name was Madison. Young, beautiful, confident. The kind of woman who still believed life only moved upward. The wedding photos appeared all over social media. White beaches, luxury resorts, smiling faces. Friends sent screenshots accidentally. Family members tried not to mention it. My daughter cried for weeks. My son refused to speak to his father. And me? I survived. Barely. The first year was brutal. I would wake up reaching for someone who wasn't there. Every room felt haunted. Every holiday felt smaller. Every memory hurt. But pain has a strange way of teaching people things. Little by little, I started rebuilding. I joined a hiking group. Started volunteering at a local library. Took classes I had postponed for decades. I made friends. Real friends. People who knew me as Rachel. Not someone's wife. Not someone's mother. Just me. For the first time in years, I felt free. The anger slowly faded. Then the sadness faded too. Eventually, Jason became something unexpected. A chapter. Nothing more. 3 years passed. I turned 51. Life became peaceful. Not perfect, but peaceful. Then one rainy Thursday evening, someone knocked on my door. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened it, I nearly didn't recognize him, Jason. He looked exhausted, older, much older. His shoulders sagged. Dark circles sat beneath his eyes. The confident man who once walked away from me was gone. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then he said quietly, "Can we talk?" Every instinct told me to close the door. Instead, I stepped aside. He entered slowly, looking around the house. The same house he once couldn't wait to leave. I offered coffee. He nodded. His hands shook while holding the mug. Finally, he looked up. Madison left. I felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not joy, nothing. Just silence. Jason laughed bitterly. "Guess that's not surprising." I waited. He stared into his coffee. "She met someone younger." The irony landed heavily between us. Neither of us mentioned it. Neither of us had to. He continued speaking, slowly, painfully. The marriage had started falling apart almost immediately. Arguments, jealousy, money problems. Different priorities, different goals, different licitious. The excitement faded. Reality arrived. And reality wasn't nearly as glamorous as the fantasy. "She said I wasn't fun anymore," he whispered. The words sounded familiar. Painfully familiar. I remembered standing in this same kitchen 3 years earlier, listening to him explain why I wasn't enough. Now somebody else had done the same thing to him. For a moment, I saw tears forming in his eyes. "I finally understand." I didn't answer. Jason swallowed hard. When I left, I thought I was choosing happiness. The room stayed quiet. I thought starting over would make everything better. His voice cracked, but I threw away the best thing I ever had. I looked out the window. Rain slid down the glass. 3 years earlier, I would have given anything to hear those words. Now they felt strangely empty. Too late. Much too late. Jason wiped his face. I was cruel, yes. You didn't deserve that. No, I hurt you. Yes, I hurt our children, absolutely. For the first time in his life, he wasn't defending himself. He wasn't making excuses, he was simply telling the truth. And somehow that made it harder. Not easier. Harder. Because I could finally see the regret. Real regret. The kind that arrives after consequences. The kind that keeps people awake at night. He looked around the room again, then quietly asked, "Have you ever forgiven me?" I thought about that question carefully. 3 years earlier, the answer would have been no. But life changes people. Time changes people. Eventually, I nodded, his eyes filled with hope. Then I added, "I forgave you a long time ago." The hope grew instantly, until I finished speaking. "But forgiveness doesn't mean I want you back." His face fell. I wasn't being cruel, just honest. Jason lowered his eyes. I figured. The truth was simple. I no longer loved him the way I once had. The woman who adored him had disappeared somewhere between betrayal and healing. In her place stood someone stronger, someone wiser, someone who understood her worth. We talked for nearly 2 hours about the children, about life, about mistakes. Before leaving, Jason stood near the door, looking older than I'd ever seen him. Then he asked one final question. "Do you think people can change?" I considered it carefully, then nodded. Yes. A small smile appeared. But change doesn't erase consequences. The smile disappeared. Because deep down, he already knew that. He had learned the lesson life was determined to teach him. Youth fades, beauty changes. Excitement comes and goes. But loyalty, character, commitment, those things matter long after appearances disappear. Jason looked at me one last time. "I'm sorry, Rachel. This time I believed him. Not because the words were perfect, because the pain behind them was real." After he left, I stood at the doorway watching his car disappear into the rain, and surprisingly, I didn't cry. I didn't celebrate either. I simply closed the door, walked back into my quiet home, and smiled. Because 3 years earlier, his leaving had felt like the end of my life. Now I understood something different. Sometimes the people who walk away believing they've found something better eventually discover what they truly lost, and sometimes the greatest revenge isn't watching them suffer. It's building a so peaceful, so complete, that when they finally come back broken, you no longer need them to stay.